I've experienced many, many earthquakes and I can feel the car start to shake. So I get out of the car and I was holding onto the side mirror to stay standing up. Let's just go home before the next one comes, because surely there'll be another big aftershock. The windows had smashed, and so we were very, very lucky. That is what you do in a nuclear disaster, is stay indoors. This is what we're going to do.
Welcome to Unpacking Japan. I'm Toby, and today with me, Jayne, all the way from Fukushima.
Hello, it's great to be here.
Thank you very much for coming for the long journey to Osaka. You are doing many things here in Japan. Among others, you started your own podcast, Transformations with Jayne, and also channels in Japan, where you talk specifically with people that expatriated themselves from New Zealand, where you're from, to Japan, and do all sorts of interesting things. But also you live in Fukushima and you've been there for quite a few years, before the major earthquake and tsunami, during and after. And so we want to go through your journey in Japan today and maybe start at the beginning. Where are you from in New Zealand and what brought you here?
Okay, so I come from a very small town in the bottom of New Zealand called Te Anau. And it's a beautiful town with a big lake and beautiful mountains, and a lot of Japanese people come there for hiking.
Okay.
We call it tramping in New Zealand.
Tramping.
Tramping in New Zealand English. And so when I was junior high, so 13 years old, then we got our first Japanese teacher at my school. And I was waiting to learn our language. Any language would do, but it just happened that Japanese was the language of the teacher who arrived. And so I started learning Japanese at 13. And I really loved learning the language. It was so exciting to learn to write kanji and write the secret code language that I could write to my friends, and nobody can understand it except the teacher, obviously.
The first time someone learns kanji or Chinese characters or something that's different than the traditional letters we use in Western countries, it's quite something, right?
It is. It's so fun.
I know what this means.
Yes. Slowly you can start to read things you couldn't read before. So that was my initial introduction to Japanese. And the teacher I had was a really lovely man and really noticed my ability in language and helped me to really focus on Japanese. So I spent 6 years learning Japanese in New Zealand up to university.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And then I had never actually been to Japan, though. I tried to get there a few ways, but it hadn't worked out. And so in my third year of university, I failed Japanese course. And I was mortified. It was the first thing I'd ever failed. So after university, I thought, I'm going to have revenge. I'm going to go to Japan. I'm going to become an amazing Japanese speaker and get one back on that course that I failed at university.
Interesting, right? How this kind of failed exam turned into the driver for you to actually go even further beyond what you may have just learned if you had stopped after that course.
Yeah, exactly. So after university, found a job as an English teacher, got my ticket to Japan.
Where'd you land?
I landed in Iwaki City, Fukushima, which is where I still live today.
Wow.
Got off the train and thought, why am I here? What is this place? And I wanted to be in Tokyo with, all my friends who'd come over on the plane kind of thing. But there was a reason. I didn't know what the reason was at the time, but there was a reason I ended up in Iwaki City, Fukushima. So do you know Fukushima much? Have you been there?
So geographically speaking, actually, it's further south than I thought. I did a double check earlier this morning, and it's just above Tochigi and Ibaraki prefectures, and it's west of Niigata, but below kind of Sendai.
Yes, that's right.
Sandwiched in between those.
Yeah, so we're on the very edge of Tohoku. And where I live is on the Pacific Sea coast. So within the prefecture, across from the Pacific Sea coast, where there's not so much snow, it's very dry, kind of like Tokyo weather, right across to Aizu Wakamatsu, where they get meters of snow a year. We're all in one prefecture there. Massive place.
It's quite big.
Huge place, which I'm sure we'll get to later a little bit more about that. But it has everything. It has the sea, beautiful mountains, skiing, onsen, golf.
Nice.
It's a resort prefecture that nobody knew about.
And what was it like for you when you first arrived in Iwaki? I don't know how big the city is, but did you think about moving away from there and going to Tokyo, where you thought you might have more friends and connections? Or did you think, I don't know what this place is like, but I'm gonna give it a try?
I think, I guess I was just so involved with getting on with my life there. I didn't really think about trying to escape too much. But then I happened to notice a very handsome young Japanese man in my school who is now my husband. So after that, I was like, oh, well, I just figure it out here.
You built a home, right?
Yeah, I quickly found a very good reason to stay. And, once we started to be in a relationship, that opened up Japan to a whole new level. I thought I was experiencing Japan. Turns out, no.
If you're by yourself, you're still always in some kind of a bubble, right?
Yeah.
Because you're limited to the things you're willing to explore, you're facing in front of you, but not the things that maybe someone can show you,
exactly,
introduce you to.
Yeah.
Today, unfortunately, Fukushima is mostly known for the incident, for the large earthquake that happened off the coast, and especially the following tsunami that damaged the nuclear reactor and everything that followed after that. What was it like before this incident to be in Fukushima?
So before that, it was just a very peaceful, sleepy kind of place. We didn't have many foreign visitors. Let's say we had no foreign visitors before that. And it was just a really nice place. You could enjoy a very high level of, a beautiful lifestyle. Like I mentioned, all of that nature right there to go and enjoy onsens and skiing and beautiful fish from the sea and fresh vegetables, all that sort of kind of sleepy lifestyle.
Especially if it's not overcrowded by tourists, it's probably even nicer because you have this traditional onsen that not many people go to except the locals, and you can enjoy it for yourself, and you don't need to book months in advance to find something with a open room. Yeah,
and you can go and play in Tokyo. It's only 2 hours from Tokyo. Spend a day, come home and go, that was fun, but I'm glad I'm home, kind of thing.
Something you have to take in, right? You have to be prepared. If you go for the first time, I have friends that sometimes come to visit and they're like, oh, I want to do all of this in Tokyo. I'm like, you won't be able to do all of that. You just take it slow and take it in, because it's a big experience.
It is. Everything is an experience. Walking out the door and trying to buy food is an experience. So, I'm very lucky now to have landed in Fukushima.
Were you there when the earthquake happened?
Yeah, so on the day of the earthquake, my daughter, who is 12 now, was unborn. And so I was 7 months pregnant with her on the day. So I'm about this big. And I was out of my house. I was at a shopping center, and I had just been to Toys R Us because I'm expecting a child. So I was looking at baby clothes. And the reason I'd gone there was because my husband was filing taxes that day. So it's March, right? Tax season.
Yeah.
He was filing taxes for me at this tax office, and he'd forgotten something. And so he called me and said, please bring this piece of paper. So I did. And then I went to Toys R Us. And then I remember thinking, should I go to the supermarket? I can't be bothered. I'll just go home. So I get in my car and I'm just about to drive out of the car park area, and I can feel the car start to shake. So I thought, what does one do when there's an earthquake and you're driving? Because I've experienced many, many earthquakes in Japan
have some also
by this time.
New Zealand, right?
Yeah, in New Zealand, and I'd lived in Japan for nearly 10 years by this time. So of course I've experienced many earthquakes, but not one when I'm in my car. So I thought, okay, probably a good idea to stop the car. So I sort of look around, anything going to fall on the car here? No, okay, I think I'm good. Stop the car, and the shaking is getting worse and worse and worse. And I'm like, this car is kind of wobbling a lot. Maybe I should get out in case the car tips over. But that was how bad the shaking was. So I get out of the car, and I was holding onto the side mirror to stay standing up next to my car, and I sort of look around, and I could see other people at the shopping center crouched on the ground because they could not stand up. That's how bad the shaking was. And so when it finally stopped shaking, I just thought, I have to get to where my husband is. So I drove over to the tax office, and he's standing outside the tax office with everybody that evacuated the building. And so we're standing there waiting and we hear, there was a very large earthquake off the coast of Miyagi, Sendai.
It reached magnitude 9.0.
9 point something. I don't know if they knew that at that point. And we were just sort of thinking, okay, well, let's just go home before the next one comes because surely there'll be another big aftershock. So we jumped in our cars and we drove home towards the sea. We had no concept that there would be a tsunami coming.
Yeah.
And luckily for us, the road that takes us out to our home turns off up the hill to where our house is on a hill, quite a few kilometres before the sea. But had we been further north, might have been a different situation, right? So we got home, turned on the TV and saw tsunami's coming. Oh my God. But for us, we had just built a brand new house, latest earthquake technology. And so not even one cup was smashed.
Wow.
Nothing was broken. My TV had walked forward a little bit on the TV stand, but
About
it hadn't,
to jump off, but
hadn't fallen off, thank goodness, because that was our only way of staying in touch with the world. After that, we lost our internet connection. We lost our water supply. We had a house with power. So we were very, very lucky. And like I just mentioned, we're on a hill, so we did not have tsunami risk where we were. So just watching that TV, watching all of the, the waves coming in, watching the people stuck in Tokyo who can't get home.
This is the most terrifying, right? You just see people that just you can't do anything. You can run away, but you can't stop that wave. You can't just prevent another earthquake or aftershock from coming. And you just have to, decide what do you do in that moment. Do you stay? Do you leave? Do you barricade yourself?
So I feel even though that actually experiencing the shaking was incredibly traumatic, I was very lucky. I had a warm home I could get to. My husband wasn't at work. We didn't know at his office buildings the windows had smashed and there was a lot of mess that couldn't be cleaned up. We didn't know any of that because we couldn't connect with anyone. That was probably the biggest thing for us. Nobody could get in touch with us and we couldn't get in touch with anyone. The phone lines were down, the internet was gone. So trying to text message on my little, those flip phone things to my family in New Zealand, I'm okay. I haven't been washed away by that tsunami that you're seeing coming over on the TV. That sort of thing was the hardest thing.
How far is Iwaki from the nuclear reactors?
So Iwaki City is a massive city. It's actually the second biggest city land area wise in the whole of Japan.
Oh, wow.
So it was the biggest city for a long time. Recently taken over by somewhere else, can't remember. Anyway, the top of Iwaki City, so it's more than 50 kilometers from the top to the bottom of Iwaki City.
Long...
And you say city, but you're driving through towns that have been amalgamated into a city. And so you're seeing rice fields and things between the towns. But so the top of Iwaki City nearly became engulfed in that biggest evacuation zone that they had for the nuclear disaster. So they started off, 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers, and it just sort of got bigger and bigger. It never actually hit our city, but where my house is, I would say it's less than 50 kilometers from the actual power station itself.
So you had some distance?
Some distance, enough distance.
When did the kind of messages come in from maybe the government or agencies asking, kind of highlighting, there's a problem at the nuclear power plant, we need to evacuate? About 164,000 people have had to move and leave their homes behind.
Yes. So at that time, we were watching the TV constantly and listening to the messages from the government. And thankfully, I had my husband who is a Japanese person who could look at those messages and say, okay, well, this is what they are saying. But if we read between the lines, this is what we're going to do. So they were saying, okay, evacuate 10 kilometers out or stay indoors 10 kilometers radius, all this sort of stuff. You're saying, well, if they're saying that for that, we are staying indoors. That was the first thing. We're not going outside because there could be stuff out there, right? Then it was evacuate 10 kilometers or evacuate 20 kilometers. So, but looking out the window, my neighbors were just going about their normal daily life.
Oh, they picked up again.
They
Shaking is over. The wave crashed. Let's go. And
they were out walking their dogs, or I saw someone smoking and walking down the street. We were inside, sheltering from. We didn't know if there was nuclear fallout yet happening. So I think it was the third day. So the Friday was the earthquake, and things got progressively worse over the weekend at the nuclear power station. And then on the Monday, we heard that it was possible to drive away from Iwaki inland over to Niigata, as you mentioned before. And we thought, if we can get inland and get to Niigata, we can go anywhere. So we decided we would evacuate on the Monday. That's less than 3 days since, just as things are starting to blow up, just as the roof is blowing off, that footage that you've seen. And that was a really difficult decision to make. And you might be like, why was that a difficult decision to make?
You're leaving your house
behind. Because we were safe. And that is what you do in a nuclear disaster, is stay indoors, right? That is how you protect yourself. You don't get in a car and drive down the road, right? So we don't want to go anywhere unless we knew we could get there safely. And once we found out, okay, the road is open, because when we drove home after the earthquake, we saw bits of road were broken, things popped out of the road, like manholes, all sorts of fences fallen onto the road, all sorts of things we had to navigate around to get home. So we just really were worried. Maybe there were bridges down, maybe there were tunnels that had collapsed, because we knew the road we would need to escape on. We didn't know if it was, we couldn't even get that information. That information wasn't available to us. No internet, TV coverages, not telling you about your local roads being open or not. So, but we heard from someone that they'd managed to get through to Koriyama, and then, which is in the center of Fukushima. So we're like, okay, we can leave. And I had a full tank of petrol in my car. A lot of people did not have any petrol, it was gasoline to go anywhere. So we decided on Monday, packed up our house. I packed up our things that we would need if we were never coming back to this house ever again. What do you need in that situation, right?
Credit card, passport, clothes.
Yeah, passport, very important papers, grandma's ring, those sort of things that you'd be really sad if you. It's not that much stuff, actually, the things you really need. A few changes of clothes to get you through. My dog, I've got a little dog. Food for the dog, food for us, water, warm blankets and things in case we got stuck somewhere. And then we left. And I dropped off the key to my house at my Ikebana teacher's house, a spare key. And I said to her, my house is full of food and full of water. If you need it, go there and you get it. I'm not sure when I'm coming back, but we're leaving. And she said to me, it's too dangerous. You can't leave. And I said, I can't stay. I'm 6 months pregnant. My hospital's closed. If something happens, I really shouldn't be here. So we took a chance and off we went, thinking we would be part of a mass exodus.
Like a movie, like traffic jam through a tunnel through the mountains.
This is what we were thinking. And we're like, we have to conserve our gasoline and make sure, keep the air conditioning off. We were the only ones evacuating.
Wow.
Yeah, at that point. And as we drove away, then we started to hear news about things blowing up, right? All that roof blowing off and things.
I kind of feel like we made the right choice.
We were just ahead of that wave. And I think people really started to panic after that and started to evacuate. And then we had, the exodus kind of thing happening. But a lot of people where I live didn't have anywhere to go. Most Japanese people live in the same town as many of their relatives, and
they don't necessarily move unless maybe perhaps they get married to someone from somewhere else,
which is not that common, right? So I was saying to my friends, well, I'm very lucky. My husband is from Tottori Prefecture, which is at the other end of Japan from where we live in Fukushima.
Yeah, it's quite a drive.
It's 1,000 kilometers, nearly 1,000 kilometers. So we're like, well, let's just head in that direction and try and get there. And so off we went. And 2 days later, we got there to Tottori, where it was all peaceful and there was food and there was gasoline and running water, and it was a completely different world to what we'd just come from.
How long did you stay away before deciding to return to Fukushima?
Well, we had 2 weeks. So my husband found out on that Monday morning, finally got through to his company, that his company would be closed for 2 weeks. It was unheard of for a Japanese company to close, right? And so he was thinking, oh, maybe I have to go to work today. I'm like, are you kidding me?
Is this what you're thinking about right now?
Yeah, right. But we managed to get through to the company, and on the answering machine was the message saying, no, we're closed for 2 weeks. And we found out it was because there was, so much damage done to the building. So we were like, okay, we've got 2 weeks holiday, so let's go to your family's house and stay there and see what happens. But yeah, we were sitting on the sidelines just watching this disaster evolve. And it was awful as well, because all of our friends, are you okay? And do you have food and water? And because nobody would deliver anything to Iwaki City in the trucks, right? None of the delivery trucks would arrive in the supermarkets were empty. If you had no cash, you couldn't even buy anything. You got to have cash.
Yeah, nothing is working.
No phone lines to use your credit card or anything. You can't get any cash out of the bank. Yeah, it was a very, very tough situation going on there. So it was very hard to sit safely with everything on the sidelines while all of our friends were going through that back in Iwaki. I was pregnant, so I was like, well, I've got to put my baby first. We stayed 2 weeks in Tottori, and then my husband had to go back to work.
They actually reopened the office.
They reopened the office 2 weeks later, and at that time we knew, okay, Iwaki City has been very lucky. The worst of the radiation has been blown in the complete other direction. And my husband has a science background, so he could understand what this actually meant, right? Rather than looking at the media and winding yourself up. So as an adult, he felt comfortable to go back there. I did not feel comfortable to go back there because my clinic where I was due to have my baby was still closed, right? They had no running water, so they couldn't even open. And so I thought, well, I'll go to New Zealand instead, because I can still fly at this stage in my pregnancy. And I've just been through this very traumatic time, so I'll just remove myself from the situation. I'll go and see my family in New Zealand, who've also been incredibly traumatized through this whole thing. And once I got to New Zealand, I decided I'm just going to stay here for a while. So until my baby was born. So I think it was August I went back to Iwaki. And by then we had a good handle on the situation, what is actually happening here. What are the radiation levels here? We could measure them ourselves in our house and in our garden and see, okay, it's not that different to anywhere else in the world. We've actually lived in places with higher radiation than this. So that was the decision to go back.
What about the aftermath? So this, you just kind of with many details described how you experienced this traumatic event, and then you stayed away for a while, but things didn't improve immediately for Fukushima. It took a long time for things to go quote unquote back to normal. And I think only recently the closest area to the reactor has been open for public again, or reopened for public. How long did it take for you to be able to pick up some sort of a normal life back in Fukushima after you came back?
So, yeah, I mean, even though I went back, it wasn't exactly calm. We always had in the back of our mind what is going on up there at that reactor, because it could have gone sideways and things could have gone badly at any point for quite a while after that, really. But I don't think it would have really mattered where you were in Japan if that had happened, right?
If it had really blown up completely, I think, the disaster zone would have been much wider.
Exactly. So there was definitely an amount of sort of, I wouldn't say, a kind of terror living with that for a while. And so we, to mitigate that, would drive around with things in our car ready to drive away if we needed to. And my husband and I had a plan if X happens, you are just not even going to go home. You're going to get on the highway and you're going to drive towards Tokyo. This sort of thing. And I've always
prepared for the worst and
prepared
hope for the
worst. Yeah. So when you do that, then you can kind of relax. Right, I'm ready for whatever happens. And yeah, so then obviously we had a period of many people who were evacuated from the closer areas and towns around the nuclear power station, moving to our city. Iwaki City is kind of well known to them anyway. They would have come to Iwaki for shopping or something. So a lot of people moved to our city and were living in prefabricated housing for a long time. So in my neighborhood, there were some parks that were turned into prefabricated housing, and that remained like that for quite a few years. It was 5 or 6 years, until they slowly, you could see people started to get on with their lives and move on to a proper home again somewhere else. Maybe not in their original town. A lot of people just rebuilt their lives somewhere else. It was the elderly that were left in the prefabricated housing, because for them, they only wanted to go back home. Yeah.
That's where they lived for the last 30, 40, 50 years.
And for them, the ultimate life is to die in your own home. And so that's what they were waiting for. And so, a lot of them have gone back maybe, but a lot of the younger families have just built a life elsewhere. And that took quite a few years. Quite a few years, yeah.
What about all the daily necessities? The hospital you mentioned that didn't have running water and was closed for a while, supermarkets or missing financial transactions, banks that didn't work. How soon after the earthquake were they able to get this back on track?
So depending on the area, so for example, where I live, we had no running water for a month, and we were the last area to get running water back, just because of our location.
1 month is a long time.
It's a long time. I'm glad I wasn't there for that.
When I was young, I remember once we had I think it was a cold winter, and some pipes froze or burst, something like that, and we didn't have running water for about 4 days.
Right.
And, we were...
Pretty frustrating, right?
Very frustrating. You can get around. It's not very eco-friendly, but you can buy bottles of water and shower with that, and you can cook with that water as long as you have electricity. But it is, frustrating. So 1 month is long, and obviously quite a challenge, especially if you have a young baby or baby.
Yeah, so that's why I was not in a hurry to go back until I knew that, the supply chains had been reestablished and the internet connection was stable again, that the aftershocks had died down. So every time there's an aftershock, everybody goes back into panic mode again. Is this going to be another one? Is this going to be another one?
Because you never know.
You just never know. And we had big ones for years afterwards. Occasionally we would have them. And there's a lot of people who were living on the edge for a long time. It was pretty stressful.
We're now having this conversation at the end of 2023, so it's been 12 years since the earthquake. What are some of the maybe misconceptions people still have today about Fukushima?
The thing that I would like people to know is what we discussed a little bit earlier, is just how big Fukushima actually is. And that actually the reactor that is called Fukushima Daiichi, it's been sort of misnamed almost. It's not Fukushima, it's located in a town, right? And normally the reactors are named after the town they're in. For some reason this one is named after a whole prefecture. So a whole prefecture got dragged down into this because of the name of the reactor, right? So I think we're down to is it 2% of our prefecture that you cannot visit at this point. It was a lot bigger before, but now it's down to just 1 or 2% that is a no-go kind of area. And to be honest, you shouldn't be up there anyway. There's no reason to go to that part of Fukushima. You won't accidentally wander in there, it's pretty difficult.
To the mountain onsen or to the beach in a house.
There was never really any reason to go to that part of Fukushima anyway, which is one of the reasons why they built
it all the way there. And
that was another interesting thing, was before 3/11, 2 weeks before 3/11, there was a massive earthquake in my country, New Zealand, Christchurch earthquake.
Christchurch, yes.
And when I saw that and I heard what happened to my relatives who live in Christchurch, thankfully they were all safe, but what they were living with in the aftermath. And I thought, well, if that can happen in Christchurch, that can happen here in Fukushima. And so a lot of people were saying to me, oh, I'm very sorry to hear about what has happened in New Zealand. Are your family okay? And that was lovely. And then I would say, oh, by the way, have you prepared for something similar to happen here? Because nobody ever dreamed that would happen in Christchurch in New Zealand. And they would say, oh, it's okay. The government would never have built a nuclear power station in Fukushima if they thought that there would be an earthquake that could damage the power station.
So kind of a
That's
full-on
what they,
trust.
That's what they believed. Many people said that to me, or almost laughed at me for preparing. When I was going about preparing for the earthquake that was to come in 2 weeks, I didn't know at the time. But
and it's interesting because you're talking about this full-on trust that the government would not have done this if this would be not safe for the people. And most of the backlash that happened afterwards was criticism towards the government, criticism towards TEPCO, which is the energy company that was managing the power plant, for perhaps not having prepared enough safety measures, not having handled the evacuation well enough, not having communicated openly enough with the public about what's happening, what are the real numbers. And today, as you mentioned, the issue for residents of Fukushima is the nuclear power plant was named after the prefecture, not the
town.
city.
Yeah.
And so when you Google or you search on YouTube information about Fukushima, you see all the horror videos or people that are still exploring it like it's a new Chernobyl and picturing it like it's a sort of a ghost town, which maybe that 2% left still is, but the rest of the prefecture is not.
Exactly. And that's the thing that really makes me very sad. People throw the word Fukushima as a disaster zone or something around without realizing just how many people and their livelihoods are affecting by saying that or writing that. Yeah.
Because tourism is not growing in that region, although it's growing elsewhere in Japan. And
well, I think, for a while we were getting the kind of black, was it the black tourism, or the people looking for that disaster, to come and ogle the disaster zone. Now there are things that you can come and you don't have to feel like, oh, am I ogling the disaster zone? We want you to come and see what we've rebuilt. A lot of it is better than it was before even. And the city that I live in today is much more convenient than it was before 3/11. I'm very grateful for that. There's been a lot of improvements since then, and it's a beautiful place to visit.
Are there a lot of initiatives that are trying to kind of change the perception of Fukushima to make it more like any other prefecture in Japan that has beautiful nature, delicious food, friendly people, and try to attract more?
Yeah, so one town that I work with in particular is called Yumoto Onsen.
That sounds good already. I like the word
it sounds
onsen,
good. Yeah. And so it's located in Iwaki City. And was it about 10 years ago, I got asked to become the English teacher for the Yunohana Kai, which is the Okami-san from Ryokan, Okami-san Kai of this town. They wanted to learn English because the 2020 Olympics was coming.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, okay, well, I have 2 young children. I have a new baby, 6-month-old baby, and a 3-year-old. Is that okay? And they're like, yeah, bring your kids. And so we'd have this English class every week. And it still goes today. I still every week go and teach them today, even though my kids are now 12 and 9 and don't come along. They do tag along, but they have kind of grown up in this English class. And so it's really lovely. There was no 2020 Olympics. There were no foreign visitors that ever came to visit us, but they were prepared to speak English to be able to deal with these customers. Anyway, when I became involved with these women, they were all okami-san of different ryokans in the town. Then I would hear them talking about the struggle that they were having, no customers coming, and the activities that they were doing. So one of the things that they'd come up with was that they would put on kimono and dance hula wearing kimono.
Hula, the dance
Hawaiian.
from Hawaii?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you don't know, Iwaki City is the hula city of Japan and the home of the spa resort Hawaiians. And I don't know, it's maybe not so well known down here in Osaka where we are, but up in Tokyo, it's very much a place to escape from Tokyo for a weekend getaway to the spa resort Hawaiian Center in Iwaki City. And so there's a movie called Hula Girls.
Oh, I think that rings a bell.
Yeah. It was about 20 years ago that movie. Just when I moved to Japan, it came out. And it's a story about how that Hawaiian Center came to be from the coal mine that went out of business. And the coal miners the town deciding to use their onsen to become this Hawaiian resort, because Hawaii's, the other prefecture of Japan, right? It's a very popular location for Japanese people. So they sort of using that, people already know Yumoto Onsen for the spa resort Hawaiians, created something different with what they could do, which Okami-san wears kimono, right? And dancing hula in kimono is a little bit difficult.
Because you're restricted in
your
movement.
Restricted by the kimono. So the movements are slightly different, but they had a professional teacher teach them, and they've been every week learning hula, and they've even had their own songs created, all sorts of things to create something that people would come to the town for. Just hours and hours and hours of effort put into doing this for not very much reward at all.
Because no one is coming to watch it.
Still not there yet, no.
This is one part of the work you do. And somewhere in the last few years after the Fukushima incident, you also started many more projects. One of them is Transformations with Jayne, which is it's your podcast that you launched and then kind of built into a platform to help others launch. Can you tell us more about what you're doing?
So, it sort of flows on from what I was just talking about with the Okami-san. Is I saw that they had these empty ryokans, and I have, friends all over Japan. I thought, what if I could get people to come here? Maybe I could do some events, right? And so that was my first go at doing something that I wanted to do, not just being an English teacher in Japan. That's kind of a problem that a lot of people, especially previously, not so much now, previously came to Japan to be an English teacher, then realized it wasn't for them. And then, maybe they got married and had a few kids and then wake up one day and go, what have I done with my life?
I feel like many people are in that situation.
Yeah. So I also was one of those people. But I was seeing these women in front of me struggling, right? And thinking, well, what could I do? And all through this disaster that I've just told you about, I couldn't really help. I couldn't go and dig ditches. I couldn't help people put their homes back together. I had one baby and then I had another baby. And I was like, now's my chance to help, right? Here there's something that I can do, only I can do. So I started by doing sort of a little events, getting people to come and stay in the ryokan, and they would be like, wow, this is a really nice little town and it's so close to Tokyo. I didn't even know this was here. I'd never have come unless you invited me. So I'm like, okay, I will keep doing that. And then I would tell the people of the town, hey, people really like your town. And they're like, what, our little town? Really? They couldn't even see how nice it was for themselves. So that was the first thing. And then after a while, I decided I still feel very isolated in Japan. As a mother of two small children living in Fukushima, I don't see many other foreigners in my daily life. Like nobody around me is a foreigner. My kids go to a kindergarten where there are no other foreign children. It's just
international school.
It's not. No, I'm there. It's just all Japanese people around me, and I was sort of thinking, well, where are all the other international women in Japan? What are they doing? And how do they feel about their lives? I want to hear from them. So at that time, I was quite interested in podcasts myself and listening to them and learning lots of things from them. And I thought, I'll see if there's a podcast about international women in Japan. Of course, there was no podcast. And my friend Jackie Miyabayashi actually lives here in Osaka, said to me, well, you have a voice for it. Why don't you start a podcast? And that was it. Here we are today talking. That was me taking, after that, I just took the first step, which was, what's the first thing, what could I do to start a podcast in 2018 and spend no money on it just to get going? Because that was all I could manage. Zero investment, and hopefully no one will hear it because it's probably not going to be very good. So that's what I did.
Hear yourself the first time.
Yeah, and I didn't have any examples around me of how to do it yet. I became that example. So first I recorded a few episodes, and my show just slowly grew and evolved into what it is today. But we had no intro music at the start. I don't think we had a graphic. I think it had a name. That was all it was. It was just me talking. But people liked it because that finally they could hear someone like them talking about things they cared about, and with, just about Japan. So that was the start. And then people around me started saying, well, could you maybe help me with my podcast that I'd like to start? And I was like, who, me? Really? And then I realized, actually you do know how to do this, since you've spent quite a few years now doing it yourself. So
this was a kind of beginning of the pod launch.
Yeah, so this is where the pod launch comes in. So people and I think podcasting was just starting to take off anyway. It had a huge boom.
Yeah, it had a big boom, especially also I think later during the pandemic.
Yes, particularly during the pandemic. So just before getting into the pandemic even was starting to take off a little bit. And people were saying to me, how did you do that? Could I pay you to help me with my show? And I was like,
maybe
okay.
There's something there.
Yeah, wow, really? And people started coming to me, and then people started noticing my work and asking them, how did you, go and see Jayne, she'll help you. So it was a needed thing for a strata of people who can't go to those big media companies and say, give me all the whistles and bells.
There are some agencies that kind of can help produce and edit and do everything for your podcast, but that is very, very costly.
Exactly.
Yeah. So if you just want to get started, you're the solution.
Yeah. So sometimes they just needed a consultation and to get them going. And some people just needed me to say, hey, I see what you're doing there. You could totally do a show, and off they'd go. And just a little push. And now we just have this plethora of shows about Japan, many by women, and women are really underrepresented in podcasting.
So you've interviewed a lot of women that are in Japan or abroad with some kind of connection to Japan and that do a lot of interesting things and also face a lot of challenges. What kind of common challenges do you notice that a lot of those women here in Japan, foreign women in Japan, are having?
I'd say the number one is loneliness, which I think is a worldwide problem. And so that is one of the great things about podcasting, is it creates a community around it so that they can tick that one off. It's someone new to get to know. They live near me. Maybe I'll reach out. And so through that, our community is really amazing. Another thing that I notice about women living in Japan is there's not a lot of examples of what's possible. What could be possible for you living in Japan? And so there are some people who feel very almost bitter that they're kind of stuck here in Japan. But I wanted to show the opportunities there are here, particularly today. We can do anything, right?
Right.
Now anything is possible.
I mean, we see it here on our show as well, where we have guests that do all kind of things, from working in consulting, from being politicians, from becoming rice farmers, hunters.
Indigo farmers, amazing.
Yes.
So many things.
If you know you can do the things, if you know the opportunities are there, you're more inclined to go seek them out and get started. But if you don't know, if you're just looking at your room or from your window and working as an English teacher that you may not be wanting to do, especially if you work for certain companies, you feel stuck.
Definitely. So it's been amazing to profile all of these different women doing different things and then have other people's listeners write in and say, oh, I heard that show about so-and-so that made me think, oh, maybe I could try that too. Or actually, I've been interested in this and I'm going to give it a go now that I've seen that. So podcasting changes lives, really does. Yeah.
How do you feel, or how have you seen some people change after, like before and after they've launched and done their podcast for quite a few months or perhaps longer?
Just the confidence that comes out in them. And you can even hear it in the first episodes. They're a little bit nervous. And then as they go along, they build their confidence in speaking. And that translates into their life. And then I always notice just these amazing opportunities coming to them once they started using their voice confidently on a podcast. People hear that and then they go, I want her to come and do this other amazing thing. So it's happened to me and it's happened to a lot of my clients as well.
It's the benefit of putting yourself out there, right? Showing you're doing something.
This is, I can do this.
I mean, this is how we found you too, because you put your work out there and I was able to find it from one link to another, and like,
here you are. Yeah. It's magical, the kinds of opportunities that come to people when they just, maybe put a toe in the water and then a foot and take a few steps. Often it involves a microphone as well, like being here talking to you today, or being involved in, Rugby World Cup was in 2019. I found myself emceeing a welcome dinner for the Manu Samoa team, right? In English, right? I was the English MC along with the Japanese MC. I was like, how did I get here? But people believe in you because you're able to put yourself out there and speak confidently.
Going back to the challenges that women are facing in Japan, you've also interviewed maybe Japanese women that are married to foreigners or perhaps not. But do you notice any similarities beyond the cultural differences, as in they face actually the same challenge at the core? Or do you see somewhat different perspectives on?
I think the women who, especially Japanese women who've gone overseas, we can identify with each other very well, because there's kind of probably been a reason why they've left Japan and they didn't quite fit in here, or they really rubbed up against society in Japan. It was uncomfortable for them. And so they've gone overseas. And they've made a success of their life overseas. So we can identify with each other a lot. And that's come out in some of the episodes that we've recorded. And we find ourselves laughing about, frozen bento items versus making them from scratch, right? But if for, people who've lived in Japan their whole life, they've maybe never questioned. Of course I'm going to make my child's bento from scratch, because that's what a good mother does.
So there are slightly different perspectives. And podcasting is a solution you provide to get people to talk, to open up, to share, and be more confident. What do you think are some of the changes that are required, maybe on a larger scale, to prevent more these problems of loneliness and isolation and lack of feeling that they are stuck and no opportunities?
Good question there. I think since COVID happened in particular, we've been encouraged to isolate, and a lot of people are struggling to de-isolate now. And maybe they have even gone too far and are now having to pull back, right? So one thing I really noticed is that Japanese people in particular really isolated themselves. Even the foreigners, isolated themselves a little bit, but Japanese people really isolated themselves. And now communication is really quite difficult between people. So, how can we get people to open up again and to trust each other again? Because there was a lot of distrust for a long time during COVID in particular. Do you have COVID? Did you tell someone I have COVID? No, I don't have COVID. Don't throw rocks at my house. This is the true story. Right. Yeah.
At the very beginning, also as foreigners, when things just started and COVID was still something foreign that was imported to Japan, and I've faced situations where restaurant owners didn't want to let me in because I was a foreigner. I'm like,
that happened to you?
Wow,
I did not experience that, but right.
And I'm like, I live here. I've been here before COVID.
I haven't been anywhere.
Haven't left the country since a couple of years. That's a big challenge, though, right? To get people to open up again and to
trust each other and communicate. So I don't have any great answers for that, but I think what we're doing with podcasting and you with creating your show here is opening up stories, right? And telling the stories that weren't there, that are missing from this. And then Japanese people or anyone can watch them, and it humanizes us all, right? Oh, you have that same problem I have, even though you have blue eyes and brown hair, right? Oh, okay. We can all understand each other a little bit better.
And it also highlights some possibilities. Sometimes a sentence that is said here or a story that is shared may also have a deeper impact on someone's life too, where they may think, oh, I never thought of that.
Exactly. Yeah.
This and so light bulb moment.
Yeah, the discussion, about something trivial like bento should be made from scratch or using frozen items. It's like, oh, I've never thought of it that way. Oh, maybe I'm going to give it a go. Maybe my children might actually enjoy frozen items, and maybe I might not be judged for putting frozen bento items in my kids' bento. And wow, that really makes my day a lot easier. I'm a lot happier now, or something, right? From something very small.
You've been doing your podcast and your pod launch family for about 5 years now. What were some of the more challenging things you had to solve to kind of get it going? Or was it more like a completely organic process for you to go from one thing to the next?
I think it was mostly getting out of my own way was the problem. I was probably the bottleneck there. Like I mentioned before, who me? Could I help you? Because I didn't study audio design engineering or any of these things. These are all self-taught and just out of interest, maybe going a little bit further and learning things. So that was the major challenge. And then once a few people sort of started working with me, I was able to use that momentum to just keep going and going and going. So, yeah. Sorry, I don't have any major challenges for you there.
But I think it's great, right? Because you just realize it's just your own mindset that needs to change.
It was just me.
And then just do without necessarily any expectations, as you started it, just thinking you'd want to help the people working at the onsen nearby and the town nearby. And it just grew one step to the other.
I think for a lot of people, you don't know what's so easy for you that other people find difficult. So for me, it was easy. All of this was very fun, interesting to learn, and I just figured it out and I did it. But for other people, that's incredibly hard. And they really, just can't. It was too easy for me. I didn't notice. So maybe for you have something similar. And for anyone listening to the show, you have something that's so easy for you that you can't imagine that anyone could find it difficult or pay you for.
Perhaps. I don't know yet. Maybe if we keep doing this, we'll eventually find out.
Yeah.
Right now, we are still figuring everything out as we go.
It's interesting too, right? Yeah. See what happens next. Who knows?
Enjoy the process.
Definitely.
I want to ask you, perhaps, you do a lot of the podcasting, so you do it in English. It's mostly for a foreign audience. But in your environment where you live, the majority of your surroundings, everyone is Japanese. How do they understand what you do in podcasting? Is this a concept, or is this a media that is popular in Japan that people understand?
It is getting more and more popular, but it's very much an untapped potential there in Japan for people to know about podcasting. And people who do know about it generally listen for the news or learning English. Slowly, they're getting to know that, you can learn anything through podcasting and that. But for example, on the ground around me, I'm a bit of a mystery to many people. That they see me sitting in my home office window and I'm like, what is she doing on her computer all day? is she working or is she just playing games up there or something? And when I try to explain it to, my neighbors, and they're, oh, okay. But it's not so well known.
What do they think you're doing when you explain it? What do you
I sort of say it's like an online radio that you can listen to anytime. When you want to listen to the radio show, you can turn it on. And they're like, oh, okay. And I make it myself and I edit it myself. And then their eyes are just like, whoa. Yeah. So for them, it's so amazing. And so that class that I was talking to you about, the Okami-san English class, I always tell them what I'm doing, like or I'm coming here or I'm going there and I'm doing these things. And so not all the members are Okami-san. Some are just, regular Ippang people who have also joined us over the years. And one woman said to me the other day, I love coming to this class because you show me that anything is possible. I'm like, wow, I'm showing you that anything's possible. She's like, yeah. You tell me about going to Tokyo and going to these meetings and meeting people. And I always thought Tokyo was nothing to do with me, or I could never be involved in things. No, I'm just little me here in Iwaki. But when I hear you talking about that, I was like, well, if Jayne can do it, maybe I could just get on and do with things I want to do. And when I heard that, I was like, wow, I just thought I was being sort of self-centered, telling them about my upcoming trip to Tokyo to go to an event or something, but for them it was opening up their world.
Have you ever considered doing a podcast in Japanese with them and maybe
oh my goodness, that would be
voices
so
to the people of Fukushima?
Interesting. Maybe you've just given me an idea.
Yeah, I think that will be very interesting to hear the stories like you shared with us today, your own experience of Fukushima, but also what Fukushima really is, which is not just a disaster zone. It's a place where many people live, with a lot of nature, with a lot of delicious food, and very friendly neighbors.
Very good people.
And so it could be interesting to hear their stories, how they've experienced that, how it maybe changed their lives, or perhaps not.
Yeah, they teach me a lot, that's for sure. And sometimes I'll bring my very gaijin ideas to class and they'll put me straight in a very gentle way and say, well, we don't think about it like that. And I'm like, oh, there you go. That's me being my individualistic Western person, and their way of thinking about it is completely different. It's just very eye-opening.
Yeah, it goes both ways.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
This was maybe an idea for you to start, but besides that, do you have upcoming projects or things you'd like to do? I mean, your journey has already taken you quite far, and do you have any upcoming projects that you'd like to share, or something you'd like to do that you haven't started yet?
Yeah, so there's the thing with Fukushima is coming up a lot for me. Personally, there are not that many foreigners who were there on the ground at that time who are still there, who can speak in English about it and what's happened so far. So it's a very kind of privileged position that I have, and experience that I have. So I'm really glad to be able to speak with you about that today, and to be able to be at a point where I can speak to you about it. Right? It took a lot of years for me to be able to actually sit here and talk to you, have a normal conversation about it, right? There was a lot of shame, a lot of fear.
A lot of shame?
Shame, like, if at first, I decided to stay here and I have to live with this decision, but everybody thinks I made the wrong decision, right? Yeah. But now I'm confident I made the right decision. But at the time, it was really hard to come to grips with that decision.
Did that confidence just come from time, or was
exactly. Seeing that seeing the evidence with my own eyes. Yeah, it was but when everything around you, the media, and everybody reading the media is saying, "Oh, you idiot! Why are you still there?" It's really hard. Yeah, but now I can say, "Well, look."
It's a commitment that paid off.
It is a commitment that paid off.
But in that moment, it's hard to decide, right?
Yes.
And you never really think that far ahead.
Yes, and that's my very Western short-term thinking mind struggled a lot. And my Japanese husband, who's much better at thinking long-term than I am, sort of said, come on, this is the right decision for us. Look, here's the evidence. Let's not make an emotional decision here. let's make a decision based on science. But the emotion was, everybody thinks I should leave. Yeah. And the media thinks I should leave and is telling the whole world that it's, you should leave kind of thing. Yeah. It's really hard. Not anymore.
That's great to hear, though. It's finally kind of that chapter coming to an end, so to say. Now you're able to share the story.
Yes. And also, recently I had a chance to meet someone who lost a daughter. And hearing him speaking about that, I thought, wow, if you can tell me about that, I need to be doing more to talk. I didn't lose anyone. I had a very good experience as far as the possible experiences during that time. I should be doing more to help talk about this so that you don't have to,
So for you, now that you're able to open up, the next steps will be to really share the story of Fukushima, share your story of Fukushima, and kind of dispel the misconceptions a little bit around this beautiful part of Japan.
Yeah.
From everything you've learned going through this experience, starting a podcast, going with the flow to meet people and hosting dinners for Samoan rugby team, what kind of advice would you want to give to people that just arrive in Japan, perhaps, and are struggling to find a foothold here?
Yeah. So I think there's like a really practical thing would be to find your international association in whatever town it is that you have landed in. Go there, that's usually in the city office. Sign up, take the Japanese courses that they're probably offering, go to the various things, meet people. That's your step into Japan if you have no other way. And start there. But you've got to be patient. It's going to take a little while. And if you can, don't move around. Stay in the one place. And for me, growing up, I lived all over New Zealand, various places. To live in one place for nearly 20 years, I've never done that before, but it has paid off immensely, living in the one place.
Setting up roots.
Setting down roots of some
becoming part
sort.
of the community.
Yeah, showing up to things, helping, being a good representative of your country every day. Even when you're putting out your rubbish, it's trash, especially when you're putting out your trash. People are watching all the time.
Did you separate everything properly?
Yeah, separate everything. Learn your garbage rules, all that stuff. It all counts and it all helps.
Socialize and go with the flow.
Yeah, and then opportunities will come, and then grab them, even if you don't know how to do it. But you might just be the best person to do it at that time. Maybe it's not your specialty, but it could be. Yeah.
And if people are looking for opportunity, they can just have a listen to your podcast and find inspiration from what other women or people are doing in Japan.
Exactly. There's so much potential in this country. We are very lucky to be here.
Yes, we are. Is there anything that you'd like to share with us today that we haven't maybe touched upon, whether it's about your work or your journey or about Fukushima as a prefecture or referring to the incident?
I would just like to say, come and see us. Come and see.
Open.
Yeah, we're open for business. And if you would want to escape some of the busyness, like Tohoku is the place to come.
So if I'm going there for the first time, and let's say I have a 3-day weekend, where would you recommend me to go?
So you're going to get off the train in Yumoto Station, and you're going to stay in one of our ryokans, which is in walking distance.
Oh, nice.
Yes, you can walk around. And then we have in Yumoto town, I think it's one of the 3 oldest shrines in the whole of Japan.
Wow.
Called Onsen Jinja. It's easy to remember.
Yeah. I will not forget this one.
And when you go there, though, it's just like, if you've been in Japan for a long time, you'll see that it's nothing special. It's just like any other little shrine in Japan, but very, very old. And the priest there is actually very young. And sort of 30s, late 30s. And he's very, very open to trying new things. And they even have an Instagram feed,
cool.
And I said to him, because, I know him and I quite often bring people there for blessing ceremonies, and we can organise to have that. We'll take you for a blessing ceremony. Have you ever had one?
I don't think so, no.
In a Shinto shrine?
Is it when you actually step into the...
Yeah, you go inside.
Wow.
And
no, I have not.
you can have a private one, or we can get a few friends and do it all together. And then you say, your name and address and what you would like to wish for, like good health or successful podcast, or, it can be very materialistic if that's what you want. You want to find a wife or something, I don't know. You can wish for that, and then they will do the ceremony for you. And I don't
just
think
that experience alone is
just
quite
that.
unique for someone coming to Japan for the first time, or someone living here that hasn't done that.
Yeah. So that, it is possible to do those. It's just often you don't know how to get it done, right? Or where do I go? And so we would go there, and I said to the priest of that shrine, like, is it okay that you have your own Instagram feed? Like, that's not very, that's very modern. And he said, for the kami-sama, how people are brought to the shrine can change with the times. What we do at the shrine does not change, right? The ceremony does not change. But how we bring people to the shrine can change with the times. And it's important to bring people to the shrine, because without people coming to the shrine, the kami-sama loses their power.
And the shrine closes down eventually.
And by, the people need the kami-sama, and the kami-sama need the people. So, yeah.
Win-win.
Yeah.
Sounds like a great start to a trip and to a long weekend around
Lots
Fukushima.
of onsens, eating delicious food. If you want to go, you can go out and see the seawall that has been built. 50 kilometers of...
Wow.
We have a cycling path that is 50 kilometers long and goes from the top of Iwaki City all the way to the bottom, all along the coast. Nice. Very, very good if you like that kind of outdoorsy sort of things. Yeah.
Well, thank you for the travel recommendations. Thank you for coming all the way from Fukushima to share your story with us. We'll put all the links to your website, to your work in the descriptions. And hopefully people will reach out and be more interested and more open to come and explore that little
I would love
Japan.
that. Would love to see thoughtful guests, people who really would love to connect with local people and respect the area that we have, and create a great atmosphere in our town while they visit.
Fukushima is open.
Fukushima is open for business. Yeah.
Thank you, Jayne.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you for watching. This was Unpacking Japan, and we'll see you again next week. Bye.
Bye.